everybody. Welcome back to another Flip in the Barrel podcast. We are here at the Digital Wildcatter studio in Houston, Texas. Shout out to Collide and Digital Wildcatters for sponsoring the room and giving us access to meet our guests in person. If you haven't heard of Collide, go check them out at www.collide.io so you can join the community of oil and gas. You need to get vetted, so go fill out your form. And then really what it is, it's a knowledge sharing platform for oil and gas folks like ourselves to not only build our network, but share knowledge within our industry. So shout out to Collide. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Megan Pearl. She's the VP of Technology at Locus Bioenergy. She's a chemist by training, a leader by growth, and a force shaped by resilience. And we are so excited to have you here today. You have an amazing story, and we have a little golden nugget that you'll find out through the episode of what she's going to be doing in a month, if you catch my drift. So Megan, thank you so much for being here today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I've been very much looking forward to this.
We are so happy to finally have you in person here.
Yes.
We've been going back and forth, I feel like, for months now. So
Yes.
we're just really glad to have you here and to see your beautiful face.
Well, you ladies are in high demand, so thank you for spending a little bit of time with me.
You're too sweet. Before we started, we were just kind of like digging into your history and where you grew up, which was on the Illinois-Indiana border. But more importantly, what I think is like our viewers will be really interested in is how you grew up. You know, you started out living with your mom. Then eventually your dad took full custody around the age of 9. And I know just coming from divorced parents that you learn a lot just without even realizing it during those early stages when you're young and your parents, are not together, and you're having to all of a sudden like learn how to manage your time with your parents, but more importantly, your emotions and just so much more. Can you tell us about growing up in that environment, and then also how that kind of inspired you to where you're at today, or some lessons learned?
Yeah, my early life was full of, I like to describe it as a roller coaster, but not the kind like in the traditional amusement parks where, it's outside and you can see the twists and turns coming. It was like have you been to Disney World?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you
The
been on
hidden
Guardians of the Galaxy one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
So it was like the Guardians of the Galaxy ride where it's in the dark. Sometimes you're going forward, sometimes you're going backwards, sometimes you're going sideways.
You don't know where
have
you're
no
going.
clue. Yeah. And so there was a lot of instability and uncertainty in those early years. And when I moved in with my dad at 9, I always say he saved my life, and I think he saved my life in more ways than one. We're still very, very close today. But, it was just the two of us for a very long time. And so I had to learn how to step up and, take care of the home. As soon as I could drive, I was getting groceries, I was cooking. I had to be self-disciplined in my schoolwork. My dad was a photographer, so he didn't very much know about science and math. I was in a small town. Everybody knew everybody. So that helped. There was a community around us, but at the end of the day, it was really just the two of us. And so I traded sort of instability for responsibility. And I think those two things really shaped how I grew up to be. Combine that with, I'm an only child. I say I'm an only child. I grew up an only child, but I have this beautiful mixed family now. I have 3 half-sisters, 2 stepsisters, and a stepbrother, for a very long time. So we have a very blended, beautiful family. But as a child, I had complete control over everything in my life. And so that created also, in addition to responsibility and discipline, control and perfectionism. And so I've learned how to use those to my benefit to progress my career, but you also have to be very careful to keep them in check so that you don't exhibit, some of the consequences of that, like burnout, fatigue, resentment, because you're taking on everything and not letting anyone help you. And so finding that balance, which honestly is not much of a balance, it goes back and forth on a day-to-day and, experience, but finding how to harness that and keep it in check has really been critical, I think, to how I've progressed through my career.
I think I love the fact that no matter how difficult it could have been to be in that roller coaster, you chose to look at the positive side and kind of take control and not blame the circumstances, but like, how do I get ahead in life because of all of this ups and downs
Yeah.
because like just knowing where you are today and who you are, who you've become, it's incredible to see from that kind of childhood of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Something that we love about you is like how big you are into science. Like when we read your resume and your PhD and everything, it was like, wow, especially knowing that your dad was a photographer.
Mhm.
So it's not like, dad pushed you into science.
Right.
You said, science wasn't something, of course, that you grew up with or family members or
Mhm.
anybody, but it found you. Can you tell us a little bit about, what got you into chemistry and just the love for the lab and then that career path all the way to a PhD?
Yeah, absolutely. My senior year of high school, my homeroom teacher was also my chemistry teacher. And so I would spend 2 hours a day with this guy and other students. And one thing he noticed is that students outside of that class were coming in asking for me to proofread their English papers. And so he made a comment to me one day that, Megan, it's really rare to have the combination of, really good English, but also really good science. You're one of my best science students. Have you considered going into a field like science writing? And I had never heard of anything like that. So that's when the dream was born. I thought, well, I guess I have something cool and unique. And so I changed my major because I had already applied to colleges with an intended major. So I changed it from psychology to chemistry. Because it turns out at the time, this is many years ago, I won't tell you how old I am. Well, at least not yet, maybe later in the episode. Many years ago, you had to, in order to become a science writer or a science editor, you had to have an MBA or a master's in science writing. And there were only 2 programs in the United States, and they were both very selective, and they required PhDs to get into the program. So I was like, well, I guess that I'll go study chemistry, and then I will get my PhD, and then I'll go get my master's in science writing. That was my plan. But when you study chemistry, there are a lot of different types of chemistry. So I'm like, what am I really interested in? And it turns out I was really interested in forensic science. It was really popular at the time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be a forensic scientist. I'm going to study DNA. I took a blood spatter class over the summer. I performed autopsies with my local coroner. Like I was all in.
Wow.
And then I went to undergrad and graduated, and I picked my graduate school based on the idea I was going to go into forensic science. So I went to University of South Carolina for my PhD because that was a program that offered in the same department chemistry and biochemistry. So I thought, okay, I can do a chemistry focus with a biochemistry sort of twist to it for the DNA stuff. And I landed my dream research position with one of the professors who was doing a project on creating a blood camera to see invisible blood stains at crime scenes. And it was amazing. So 3 of the 4 years of graduate school, I worked on that. And then my last year, the funding, like most things, the funding ended, and I got transferred to the other project in the lab, which is by title not nearly as cool, but it was classifying species of phytoplankton in the ocean. And so I did that for my last year, and that is how I eventually ended up at Halliburton in a crazy twist of fate there.
Yeah, no, I'm like astonished just
That's
hearing
crazy.
about the forensic science and like I'm like wait, so why didn't you just stay on that path? And it's
Yeah.
so interesting because in the medical field, like there's all these cool things that like chemists can do and you can find and you can like do like stuff that's not even imaginable, and then you end up going
Yeah.
and working in oil and gas, which
Yeah.
is super exciting, of course, always. But tell us about like what was it like when Halliburton called?
Yeah.
And were you like that transition? Like, were you thinking all this time I spent on the medical, I'm interested
Something
in
else.
that,
Mhm.
and now this is like completely opposite. So what was going through your head when that happened?
Yeah, so I was working at Sandia National Labs as a postdoc, writing algorithms to assess decades old data on nuclear weapons. So I got a cold call from Halliburton saying, hey, we have a job. It's in Brazil. We asked your advisor, your graduate advisor, who he would recommend, and he recommended you. The reason they asked him is because that last year of graduate school, Halliburton purchased the rights to the technology that I was working on in the lab. It wasn't my technology. I had just been working on it in that final project to use in energy. And so Halliburton was trying to roll out this technology as part of some of their internal technology to offer. and they needed someone who knew it. So I said, well, this is great, but my husband is a chemist too, and he's a recent grad. We met in graduate school, and he cannot not work for
Yeah.
multiple years. And so they said, okay, we'll call you back. And so they called back and said, well, you know what? We can offer you both a job, come here. And we interviewed on the same day, hired on the same day, started on the same day.
Wow.
Oh, wow, that's
Um,
awesome.
I was never expecting to go into oil and gas because I'm from that, as you mentioned, very small farming community in the Midwest. So oil and gas were things that you did, were put in your car.
Yeah.
I had nothing, so I knew nothing about the industry at all. I was just a bright-eyed recent graduate who, with my husband, who also was getting a good job. And so it just seemed like, well, of course we're going to do this,
Mhm.
But I did know the technology. So I think I had that working in my favor when I started in the industry. What I underestimated was how difficult it would be to get into this industry and understand everything that was going on around me, even though I had the backbone of the technology.
Wow. So you take the job. You guys have no kids, just recently
Mhm.
together since college, and then you go to Brazil. You spend there 3 years.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about just the culture difference, maybe the shock into new industry, new country, new language, because it's not like everybody speaks English,
Right.
when you go to the store, etc. Tell us a little bit about that, but that also like working with your husband.
Yeah.
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 It's a big whirlwind.
There's a lot there,
Yeah.
yes.
So tell us just a little bit, break it down for us, and then maybe some of the lessons you learned of, one size doesn't fit all, which you mentioned about leadership.
Yeah. I thought when I accepted the position in Brazil, it was in Rio. So it was a really great place to be, especially with no kids. I thought, well, I've already been culture shocked, right? I'm from the Midwest.
Yeah.
And I moved to South Carolina, and then I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then I moved to Houston, Texas. So I already know culture shock, but I did not know culture shock at all. They dumped us in Brazil, in an hour away from the office on a weekend. This happened to be when we moved. The next day, the Monday was a holiday, and we were dropped into corporate housing that had no food. There was no water. The pilot wasn't lit on the stove. There was no lighter. And so it was one of those moments where it got really fast.
fast.
Yeah, like, what are we going to do? And to your point, they speak Portuguese there. And we had taken, 10 Rosetta Stone lessons at that point.
Yeah.
And so we had no clue. So I studied Spanish in high school, but I never used it conversationally. But that was all we had to go off of. So we found a grocery store nearby. We were able to get a few items. We got a frozen pizza. But again, the pilot light wasn't lit. So thankfully there was like a George Foreman grill. So we had to fold the frozen pizza and cook it like a
Oh my gosh.
like as a sandwich on the George Foreman. And that's what we ate our first night in Brazil. So it started off challenging. And the culture shock was real. I tried to force my way of living and my way of thinking onto everybody there. We were the only Americans in the building. At the time, it was all Brazilians. And, there's just a different pace. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't my pace. And I had to hire a team down there, and I overheard in the break room my team speaking with some of their coworkers, and their coworkers were saying, "Oh, we're so sorry that you have to work so hard." And it was a moment for me where I thought, I have to step back, right? I have to adjust. I can't expect them to all adjust to me. I'm living and working in their area, right? And so I started realizing, okay, what are the critical things that need to get done to keep the project on time? What are the things that can be pushed off, and what are the things I can do to assist my team in finding success? And it was through that balance that I hope at least everybody was happy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Working with my husband, when we moved there, the technology center was not complete. but they were like, you're here to work in Brazil, so we have to ship you there. Like, you got to go. So they put us in the corporate office downtown, 2 scientists there to open a technology building in a laboratory and run a project, different projects. And they put us in an office. And then they thought, well, since you're married, you all can share a desk. So when I say we spent 24 hours with each other a day, I mean, I am not kidding. It was every second of every day. And there were times when the traffic was so bad getting home, it would take us, instead of an hour, 4 hours on a public bus after sitting in the same cubicle all day with literally nothing to do. I would tell them, like, you got to go over there and I'm going to go over here. Don't even breathe in my direction for like 2 hours. Like, I just need a break.
Yeah.
But it also, we were newlyweds, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, it was a lot of professional and personal growth for both of us. And I think that it definitely helped us become stronger when we moved back, because we learned a lot about each other in those days that we probably wouldn't have learned otherwise without those challenges.
Wow, I'm just like imagining just like the whole scenario of being stuck with your husband, like literally 24/7. I hope you got to do some fun stuff while you were in Brazil.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time at the beach. That's
okay,
for sure.
good. So you spent 3 years there, but you spent 9 years in total with Halliburton. So you moved back. Tell me about transitioning into new roles, especially after knowing being expert scientist and then getting transitioned out of that into a leadership role or something where you're not maybe the expert anymore. What's some advice that you have for our listeners when you're kind of moving in your career, trying to find that right direction, and you're being challenged with roles that maybe you weren't an expert in, especially coming from somebody who was a perfectionist? I can see that very challenging. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that's really difficult. And that transition, when we moved back from Brazil, I spent a few more years in the lab or leading the lab before someone from a different side of the company approached me. She had seen me in a meeting, a customer meeting, and she thought, that's something I could use, that kind of characteristic in my group. So I guess I did not see what she saw. I didn't see in myself what this woman saw in me. And that was my first lesson, that you have to, in addition to knowing your own strengths, you have to listen to what other people say about you and what they notice about you, because sometimes you can underestimate the value that you bring. And it's only through listening to the feedback of others that you can see where your true value lies. So I decided that I would just make this leap, because it was the same company in the same industry. How hard could it be? And like so many other times in my life, I was proven wrong. It was very, very difficult. I had no clue what to do. I went from an expert to a complete novice.
And what role was this?
Yeah, so I went from sort of wireline, where I was building tools and lab equipment, into production enhancement, leading chemistry. Although I am a chemist, I spent most of my graduate career building instruments. So my wireline role was very much aligned with my experience. I know people think, oh, you mixed chemicals, as a chemist, but I never did that. And so transitioning into this was a true chemist role in a leadership position. So I wasn't in the lab doing it. I was leading the chemists. So how am I going to tell them what to do without knowing what to do?
Yeah.
So what I learned very quickly is that I didn't know anything. I couldn't even speak the language. All the acronyms were different. We love our acronyms in oil and gas. And so I learned humility very, very fast. I learned the ability to ask questions at the risk of sounding silly or unintelligent, because I had in my mind, this is for growth. And if I'm going to succeed at this job, I have to take in all the knowledge I possibly can. And so I did. I just asked lots and lots and lots of questions. Probably people were so tired of me asking questions, but it got me to a point where I understood sort of the process maybe in a different way. I brought a different perspective than what all of them currently had. And that's really helped me in my current role as well.
That must have been a big adjustment from being literally the expert, like the PhD, the smartest person in the room who knows everything about the tool, and we don't know anything, to the complete opposite.
Yeah, it was really difficult.
I just thinking about it, I can't imagine where people always come to you for advice, for help. Like, she could write the papers, she knows everything, to literally leading a team that you don't know what the chemistry part of it is. But I think those roles are the ones where you learn the most, and now you're fully rounded leader where like, okay, you're like, I know how to work all of this stuff today.
Yeah, and it taught me that I'm stronger than I know and
Mm-hmm.
more resilient than I know, right? That I can do hard things and I can succeed. So it made those future decisions a little bit easier to make.
Yeah, and I also think, and people will laugh, it's like you got to those roles where you're like, oh, I get that nobody knows what they're doing, and that's leadership. Like literally, you're like, oh, welcome to the club of all of us who are like running teams and we don't know what's actually happening.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about when you decided to leave Halliburton and where did you go next? Did you go to Locus Bio?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that transition, and then let's get into motherhood.
Yeah. So again, that was a very difficult decision for me. I was very, very comfortable at Halliburton. I was getting all of the right signals from the leadership that I was also on the leadership track. It just needed to, I'll say, pay my penance, like do my time, right? And in the world would be mine, or that's how I saw it at least. But really, what happened is there were some changes in management where I'd say maybe some people who were formerly my coworkers in a previous role were promoted into positions that I felt like I had worked really hard to get into those positions. And constantly I was told, well, Megan, you're great, but you got to check this box. Okay, so I go check that box. Okay. Okay, great. Now you got to check this box. Okay, so I go check that box. And then again, from my perspective, it's my own personal perspective. I didn't feel like a lot of those boxes were checked with some of these other people. And so it felt like, well, you know what, maybe I am not the type of leader that they want. And if I'm not that type of leader that can grow in this organization, I know I have value to bring. What can I do? And quite honestly, it was my husband who sent me job after job after job. He's very, very persistent, okay?
Yeah.
And I've learned this after over a decade of being with him, very persistent. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's not going to stop until I apply.
Yeah.
So I applied to the ones where I was like, maybe this is kind of relevant. But like so many women do, I looked at these job descriptions, especially the job I applied to at Locus Bioenergy was the director of technology. And I read it and I was like, I'm not qualified. I don't have all of these skills. I probably cannot do this job, but I really want my husband to leave me alone and stop sending me jobs, so I'm going to apply. And then they called me back. And then I went through a series of 3 interviews, and it was during those interviews where they were asking me questions, and I thought, I got off the first one, and I told my husband, I think I can do this. This is crazy. Like, I nailed that interview. So I started knowing that I probably could do this job, but not knowing how to do the job. And Halliburton is a very large corporation, and I went from a very large group to a very tiny team. Locus is a startup, and at the time, 3 years ago, we were in a different phase in our startup growth as we are now. And so it was one of those, there was no one else to do the stuff. So I had to learn very quickly what has to be done and how to do it, because if I didn't do it, it wasn't going to get done, right? And it was also a very strange time for me to do that because I had just had my 3rd baby. I was stressed with that. And then again, I was really comfortable at Halliburton. I was being stretched as a mom in totally new ways that I didn't know. And then I was comfortable in my career, but I was like uprooted all of that. Why not do all the crazy stuff at one time, right?
Sounds right. Sounds right. Oh my gosh. So when you transitioned and having to deal with that, what, like looking back at that time, because right now you are pregnant with your 4th.
Yes.
So obviously it didn't scare you enough that you were like, I could do it again. So what would you bring into this transition that you learned from the last one? And what I mean by that is so many times women also believe that, well, I'm pregnant or I just had a kid, I can't make this transition. And I myself transitioned with an 8-month-old into Baker Hughes from where I was working at Next here. So like I understand that also mentally you have to be strong, be like, I can do this, doesn't matter, I'm moving roles, it's not that big of a deal. But a lot of people think, well, I need to wait another year or this isn't the right time. So tell us about kind of what advice do you give, especially like the women listening, on like taking control of your career.
Yeah.
Because like we always say, like if you're not going to do it, nobody's going to do it for you.
Exactly,
And nobody
yeah.
has any plans for you either.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
you have to build those plans.
Yeah, you are the owner of your career, right? So you have to decide what you want and go for it. And just like having children, you will never find the perfect time to have a child, ever. You will never find the perfect time to get a promotion or to seek that next role. And I did not anticipate that I would be in this position that I'm currently in for many reasons. This is my fourth. My other children are 4, 6, and 8. So as you can tell, there's a 2-year age gap between all of them. We were done,
Yeah.
done. And then surprise, we're not done. And so there was a huge adjustment for me there because I'll share my age now. I celebrated my 40th birthday very recently. Also 5 months pregnant, which was not the plan. I had huge plans. This is the year of Megan. We're going to go do all these fun things that Megan wants to do, you know, after dedicating my life to my children for the past 8 years. Like, let's do something. And then that's all on hold because here we are with another baby. But, you know, I thought at least I'm not also facing changing jobs, right? Or careers or anything like that. Like I love what I do. And if you ever are in a meeting with me, my passion for what I do comes out instantly. And so I was very comfortable there. I've become comfortable after 3 years. But we've had some changes within our organization. And what that means is more responsibility for me. And so we have 4 different business units. And from a technology standpoint, I am now over 3 of the 4 business units. And that is all very recent, like within the last week. So we had a board meeting last week, and all of the board members are like, "Can you do this?" Like, yeah, I'm going to give you everything I got for the next month.
Yeah.
And then I'm out for a little bit, and then I'll give you everything I got when I come back, you know? But inside, I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? You know, my current role within oil and gas alone occupies all of my time when I'm at work. How am I going to now divide it between 2 other groups? You know, and I don't know the answer to that. Just like I don't know the answer to my 3 kids take up all of my time. How am I going to divide that with another kid? But you know what? As moms, we just figure it out because there is no other option.
Yeah.
That's the power.
Yeah.
You just
True.
figure it out.
Yes.
And you just look back and then you wonder how would I have ever done this, like, not with 4 kids? Like, you're gonna look back and be like, why did, like, 3 would have never made sense. 4 only made sense. Like, it's just wild how the brain is like,
it rewires.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then with the job, it's gonna be like, how was I just managing 1?
Right.
Like, 3 is like,
Like, give me the 4th.
yeah,
give me
maybe
the 4th one.
Like, give me the 4th. Like, I love it.
And I think that's one thing, you know, we have as moms, we have the capacity to stretch in ways that men just can't. They just can't because they don't know how to, because they don't have to. But we have to constantly stretch ourselves. And the only way we survive is by stretching and expanding, not stretching ourselves thin, right? And so I think that's why we are very well positioned to rule the world one day.
Yes. Yes. I'm curious to know, because I think this is good for the listeners, in that portion of Halliburton when you were checking off the boxes but seeing other people get promoted, if you had to pinpoint what that was, what would you attribute that to?
Why that was happening?
Yeah, like, do you think it was like they knew each other? It was relationships? It was
They
their
could play golf
network?
together?
Yeah, like, because we hear this a lot and
Yeah.
I've seen it a lot, but I'm just curious to know on your end,
Yeah.
what would you attribute that upwards of all these people? You're like, they don't have the boxes checked.
I hate that this is my perception of it, but there was one very big difference between me and all of them, and that's that I was a female. I don't want to believe that was it, right? And not to say that these former coworkers, they were great. You know, they were perfectly capable of doing these jobs 100%. So these weren't bad decisions. I just felt looked over. And again, the only thing I could contribute it to was that I was a female. I had my PhD. I also have my MBA. And so I had something that they didn't have. I had the international experience that they didn't have. So, you know, again, when I boil it down, that's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah. And to that, I mean, the only solution is do what you did.
Yeah, right. You have to just take ownership. And in fact, I was talking with a coworker who also felt passed over at that time for some of these same positions. And we were at lunch and I looked at him straight in the face and I said, well, when are you going to take your career into your own hands?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh my gosh, what a hypocrite, you know?
Yeah.
Like I need to take my career into my own hands and do something about this. If I don't like the situation I'm in, it's up to me to change it. No one's going to do it for me.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so true. And you're a prime example of finding
Yes.
a solution, finding your way out. Thanks to your shout out to your husband.
Yeah.
Yes. Who pushed
was,
you?
who was, yeah, persistent.
Mhm.
But that's why it's also important to always have that person that is pushing you and like
Yeah.
into ways that like you weren't gonna apply because you were like, I'm comfortable, I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's always good to have that
Mhm.
advocate, have it be your husband, a friend, or whoever it is. You need those people in your circle.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's another really great representation like of your story of like having that person in your circle that's like, hey, you need to do this. And like lo and behold, it turned out incredible for you.
Yeah. And I would say, this role has not been the easiest at times. We go to, I attend a lot of industry events and conferences, a lot of customer meetings, and there are many times when people will not even look at me or speak to me, especially when I have my sales guys with me, that they have a conversation with them. And I used to be very offended by that they won't acknowledge all of the things that I've done and what I bring to the table, but they don't know me. Okay.
Until you're like, you pull out the resume and
Right.
they call you Dr. Pearl.
Yes,
They're like, oh, I need to talk to Dr. Pearl.
That's exactly right. That's what happens is they ask a highly technical question
They're like,
to
"She's
one
right
of the
there."
guys. Yeah. And they're like, well, let me have Dr. Pearl address that. And so what I've learned is to, keep my composure when I feel like I'm underestimated, because actually it's a moment of strength for me. And most of the time, these situations are not about me at all. They're about them. They're about the insecurities that they have. And sometimes they'll try to push me into a corner, right? They will avoid asking me questions or ask me questions they're like, oh, I know she can't answer. I'm going to get her, And sometimes I can't answer them. I don't know everything. But at least I have to recognize that this is not a slight against me. Right?
No.
And in doing that, I can walk away from the situation feeling more empowered. Even though they doubted me, I feel more empowered afterwards because maybe they walk away with a little bit of humility that they passed judgment before they should have.
Yep. No, I
love
think,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I think you ended it on such a good note. And I think that's so important what you just said for anybody out there, man or woman, like when you leave a situation and like feel more empowered by it. Maybe they didn't realize like, oh my gosh, there's this famous guy my husband watches all the time, I have to say, on Instagram. And he's like a billionaire and he'll dress up on the street as a worker, like brushing leaves and stuff. And he'll try to hit on women. It's so funny. And they're like, I want nothing to do with you. And then he's like, all right, takes off his thing and he opens the car to his Lambo.
Yeah.
And they immediately turn around. Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
What did you say? Like, it's so funny.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's in all walks of life.
Yeah.
Like,
It's everywhere.
people underestimate, they judge. And so I think it's so important, like what you said, is like walk away feeling empowered. And, you earned that title, Dr. Pearl, and that is who you are.
Yes,
And
we love it.
I love it. So thank you so much for coming and meeting us here at the Digital Wildcatter Studio, sharing your amazing story and journey with us. I know I'm fully inspired and I love just hearing about the beginning of like your life and like you came through so many challenges at such a young age and not knowing oil and gas, getting into it by Halliburton calling. I mean, just so many amazing things in your story that I think really show the power of energy and just like the opportunity. So thank you for coming here today, Megan, and speaking with Massiel and I and our community on Flipping the Barrel.
Yes. Thank you so much.
And if you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, leave us a comment, DM us, www.flippingbarrel.com. You can find out all our information and our two other podcasts, Energy If You Know You Know, and Masa de Barril, our Latin America podcast. So we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.